Hey Phil, great to see your take in the collab. This is on the take, setting the scene, take two. Let's hear it, and I'll give my thoughts on it. All right, so I think it's a good take. Solid rhythmically. Well, how'd that go again? The second one. So one thing I like the build up. I like that you kind of repeat a phrase and kind of respond to it. And I think Gabriel has a course on call and response. And I think one thing that would really benefit this is to focus a bit on the chords beneath the melody that you're playing. You don't have to play within the chord tones all through the chord. You know, the B minor. Hang on a second. You can go outside that. The thing is, though, when you hit a note that's outside the chord tones, they usually want to go back into the chord. So it ends on a strong note, the phrase. As opposed to lingering on a note that's not in the chord. And I think it's a very, very small fix. Like, especially that phrase you've got. It's kind of nice. So, let's start over from the solo. This is kind of off the top of my head. But the first chord in the backing track is a B minor. We start on that. And let me just put the backing track on for a second. So, one, two, one. So, at this point, we're moving from the B minor chord into the A major chord. And that means when you play that high note, that's actually outside the chord. It's not a bad note choice as such, but it feels like it wants to resolve back into that A major chord. So if we try and, instead of playing that high note on the B, because at that point when you reach that high B note, we were actually in an A major chord. So maybe if we land on the A note on the 10th fret of the B string, it's a different sound, but it's gonna sound interesting, I think, over the backing track, and maybe more resolved in a way. And the same goes for some of the other phrasings. Obviously, I'm gonna let you experiment, but when you play that That is again over the A chord. And it's a nice note. It's an emotional note. If we resolve it at the end of the phrase towards that A note or another note inside the chord, that's going to give us sort of a more resolved feel and less tension. And tension is good if it's resolved again. So let's try an example here. Instead of hanging on to that note. And then the next chord is a G major. Play the same lick again. But you know, this time the B note is actually in the G major chord, sitting right there. So it works in that setting. It feels resolved already. Or you could end on a D note if you wanted. So coming from that, A major into the G major, and what's the next part? Oh, this is not your solo. It's just the backing track. Here we go. And I think it's sort of similar here because we're still on that G chord. Still in the G chord. And those would be the strong notes to land on. Your phrase can be whatever. You can almost even play a note that's outside the scale as long as you resolve it back in. Oh, this is weird. Oh, we're going back home. Good. That's kind of what it can sometimes feel like. So on the G chord there, what was it again? Yeah. So that note is outside the G chord, G major chord, and it has the G major chord has the D, and it might want to go back to that. And let's see how that sounds. Or you could keep your tone in there, your choice, and just fold back to that D note to resolve it. And the interesting thing about that is that after the G chord, there's a D major chord happening. And if you're already landing on that D note, see, it's already working for the next chord. And those are some thoughts, some things to think about anyway. Kind of, you can stay in the same position in that B minor pentatonic box. But work on where the chord tones of the underlying chords are. So if we are in the B minor chord, and these are some of the things that arpeggios can be good for, because you'll know that the chord tones are there. In the A major, still staying around that position, you'll have the C sharp, which is not entirely in the pentatonic box. It's the note just before the second note. So that's the first note we have in this box from A major. The next note. And with a bit of a stretch, we can go to the 11th fret. And for the G, we have the D, we have the G, we have the B, we have the D again, the G, the B, and the high D. And for the D, I think that was the next chord. You again have the D note. You have the F sharp, and you have the A. Anyway, these are the strong notes inside the chords, and I think you can figure them out pretty easily. I think you've got absolutely capable of doing that. So the first, to get you started, hang on, I've got a cat here somewhere. To get you started, the first notes in the B minor chord. And the next chord is the A major. And so on. You can work out those chord tones, and those chord tones are the strong choices for the resolving the phrases and going back into the chord. So if you're in B minor, strong note, strong note, strong note. And if you're in A major, hang on a second. You can play the same phrase, of course, but maybe work on landing on the final note on a note from that chord. And same with the G chord. And so on. And I think that's gonna make a really strong feel to what we've got going. As I think the main takeaways here are that phrases can be almost whatever. They can be spicy, but if you end on a chord tone, it feels like coming back home again. You go out a bit and then come back home. And let me just try something interesting here. I'll play a note that's completely outside, but I'll try to make it work by going back in. So you have a B minor chord here, and then I'll play like an F note. Hanging on to that note sounds. But what if we bring it back into the chord? Suddenly that note makes sense. That just happened to be the blue note, by the way. It could be some other note. Let's do let's do the major third, which is actually like a D sharp. Sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But if we bring it back in, bring it up. So, spicy notes are good when you bring them back in. And I think that really tie what you've got going here together, kind of hang on to some phrasing ideas, but bring them back into the chord tones. And if you want, I can work through the chords and the chord tones and show you where they are in the pentatonic box. Kind of show you that if you want. Anyway, it was nice to hear this take. I'll get going with the second one you uploaded.